Again, we're going to tackle two today. We're going to go in the fourth and fifth commandment this time. You'll note that I had a little opener there at the top. And these, by the way, those are my own words at the top. The world is in chaos with no end in sight, right? Yep, not going to happen, right? Now, the second table of the law, though, begins with that which helps to keep the world from falling apart. In other words, this becomes foundational for our lives with or among, we say, among the world. We're people in the world but not of the world, okay? The maintenance of authority and order, all right? The maintenance of authority and order. Now, quick on the heels, the second commandment we're going to do is, failing that commandment is the result, murder, okay? By the way, whether it's actual murder, you actually stab somebody, or even as Jesus says, if you hate someone, it's murder. So, but that's what the lack of order and authority is, chaos and murder. So down on the right-hand side, we're going to do that first over there. What is the fourth commandment?
Honor your father and your mother.
What does this mean?
We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them.
Not too bad. That's pretty much in unison. I haven't started cracking down the confirmands yet, but if I don't start hearing them pretty soon, I want to hear them. Then I'll be like, all right, we're starting over, starting over. All right, ready? What's the fifth commandment?
You shall not murder.
What does this mean?
We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need.
Okay, here we go. Ready? These are the holy 10 commands God gave to us by Moses' hands. When high on Sinai's mount he stood, receiving them for our good. Have mercy, Lord. You are to honor and obey your father, mother every day. Serve them each way that comes to hand. You'll then live long in the land. Have mercy, Lord. You shall not murder, hurt, nor hate. Your anger dare not dominate. Be kind and patient, defend, and treat your foe as your friend. Have mercy, Lord. Our works cannot salvation gain. They merit only endless pain. Forgive us, Lord, to Christ we flee, who pleads for us endlessly. Have mercy, Lord. Okay, now, if I walk up to you and I say, obey me, all right, how do you feel about that?
You're not the boss of me.
Right. Yep. I mean, we talk about that. It's like, obey. Of course, it's always fun to do the teaching of marriages, premarital counseling, and we come to that text, where it says, "You wives, obey your husbands as to the Lord." And I always stop right there, and you could almost sense the tension start to rise. And by the way, not only in her, but in him as he's thinking on her now. Right? But we hear that word obey, and it just sort of gets us. It starts to do that. And what's the reason that obeying bothers us? Or submit. There's another one. I need you to just submit to me.
It takes the power away from you.
It takes away sinful nature.
Yeah, it takes the power away. It's our sinful nature rising up or welling up within us. I would argue, though, that wouldn't even happen if the person that was in authority over you was perfect. Right? I mean,
I would obey him every day.
every day if he was perfect, right? Sorry, Dave. Sorry. Well, guess what? The good news is, Dave, she's already been given the command, so it don't matter anyway. Yeah, but we have a hard time because in our hearts we don't trust those people that are over us or whatever it is, and not to every degree, the child that's got the little floaties on the arm and jumping into the pool to the arms of the parents, I mean, they've obviously got trust. So it's not all the time, but the worst part about it is the older we get, the less we trust, But that's because the older we get, we see more people sin, and we see these things happening. And as soon as we see sin, the devil encourages us. Okay, you saw sin. Let's put the courtroom in session, shall we? And he encourages us to put judgment over others as soon as it happens. So that's that's what we do. And I love the James 4. Did anybody look that up? James 4, 1 through 3, because it goes to the next question. What is it that brings up anger in our hearts?
What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive, because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions.
Right. I love that passage, because not only does it say, not only do you not ask, but even when you do ask, you ask it wrongly. I mean, that's kind of condemning, and that's because we ask according to the self, and it's just and it's not. And by the way, you should ask for things for the self. It's not saying you should don't go all the other way and just quit taking care of yourself. You should ask for things for the self. But that shouldn't be what drives you when it comes to the Lord. What should drive you when it comes to the Lord is what the Lord himself has said. And this is, again, what leads to such things as anarchy. It's also what leads to depression and to a suicide and stuff like that, is because we're asking the wrong sources about our identity. Sometimes we ask ourselves and we get depressed. Sometimes we ask others and we don't know what's going on in today's world. They're having an identity crisis like you wouldn't believe, right? Okay, for examination, here's some questions here. I'm going to read through them. You can follow along on that page. Remember, this is part of a big examination according to the Ten Commandments. If you'd ever like a copy of it, let me know. I can print you one out. Hopefully, maybe you've been hanging on to these. But how do I examine myself according to the fourth commandment? Here's the questions. Have I cared for my children as a father or mother placed by God to nurture these children in fear and love of His name?
Sometimes.
Right? I know. You grow up and they say, that's not what we do in the Kale household. Right? Not in the Kale household, we're not going to do that, right? But really we should say that's not what we do in God's household, right? Yeah, which, this can be synonymous, hopefully, at least have some symmetry. Have I taught my children, prayed for them, brought them to worship, and instructed them in the baptismal life as God's own beloved children? That goes with today's sermon, right? Has the fear and love of God shaped my honor and obedience to parents and others in authority over me? I love that. Fear and love of God. Have I trusted God to bless me and make my life good when I submit to the authority of parents and those over me? Or have I been angry with them, rebelling, fighting against them, because I was afraid I was not getting what I had a right to get? Have I been insolent, sullen, and disrespectful to my parents, teachers, employers, and other authorities over me? Have I been on good behavior when they are present and mocking them when they are absent? Have I given honor and respect to the pastoral office? Have I helped those who carry responsibilities of governing? Do I pray for parents, leaders of the nation, schools, and church? Do I grumble about work given me to do? I like that pray thing too. I don't know if you guys do this. Hopefully you guys have your own personal prayer list too. I mean, we have the one, that's why the bulletin's always good to take home because it's got the prayer list in it, right? But you also should have a personal prayer list also, that says like every day I'm going to pray for the president or the governor. I tell people, maybe don't pray for the president every day, but pick like, I'm going to pray for the nation on this day. I'm going to pray for the state on this day. I'll pray for the county on this day. So your prayers are kind of rotating. But do we add those authorities in our prayers besides "Oh Lord, destroy them." Which sometimes they're worthy of such curses, but we really want them to repent and, go the other way is what we really want. So think on those things. Okay, next one under the line is the fifth commandment. Have I treated my neighbor's body and life as great gifts of God to him? Have I killed my neighbor with violent actions, hurtful words, or murdered him with thoughts of anger, contempt, or hatred? Have I killed my neighbor with ridicule, neglecting to feed or clothe him, or withholding compassion and comfort from him? Have I avoided giving help to my neighbor or getting involved with him in his difficulty? You look at somebody, you're like, okay, just don't make eye contact, right? Do I abuse my own body with neglect of health care, excess use of food? Oh, dear. Drink, oh my. Tobacco and drugs? How about 75% of those? Do I abuse my own body and life with contempt and disgust without withdrawing it from service to my neighbor? Now, there's a thought. Your body was made for service to neighbor. And that's it's not usually the way we think. All right, other side, here we go. Fourth commandment first. All right, so we're going to look at a couple passages here, Ephesians and Exodus, and answer this question as we read these texts. What is the blessing of this commandment, the fourth commandment? Okay, go for it.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Exodus 20:12, anybody?
Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you.
Okay, so Paul in Ephesians is actually quoting from, obviously, Exodus chapter 20 as it does this. So what did you get out of that? What is the blessing of this commandment? I want to hear from you.
That you'll live long.
Live long, right?
In the land.
Right.
Live long in the land.
In the land. I mean, we know because of our honor of God, the first table law, we will live long in eternity. But now we've come to that horizontal aspect of the law. Remember, the first three commandments are vertical. I can't break commandments 1, 2, or 3 against you. I can only break them against God. Okay. Now we go into 4 on down. They're vertical or horizontal. In other words, I can break anything from 4 to 10 against you. Okay. That's why if somebody comes to you and they charge you with sin. Hey, you sinned against me. Wow. Which commandment? I'd like to know. I don't know what commandment is. Well, let's figure it out then. I'll help you do it. Yeah, how did I do this? It's got to be 4, and really it's got to be 4 through 8, because 9 and 10s are sins of the right. So they can't read your thoughts. Well, sometimes you kind of give them away. But it's really got to be 4 through 8. Which commandment was it? And you sit down and you work that out. I've had people do that with me before, even as a pastor. Hey, pastor, we're angry with you. Probably for good cause. Let's figure that out, right? Why don't you sit down and we'll figure out how I sinned against you. But you go through those commandments, that vertical or that horizontal relationship, man to man. So in it is where we begin to get things like order, and as he promised, good life, a long life as well. That when you're fulfilling these things, you live in a society that has a blessing. As I talked about before, when you come into a society that is Christians, you walk into a room, these people are thinking on you. That's the whole point, that they're devoted to you. Where if you come into a society that is always self-centered, then everyone is thinking on themselves. Okay, and God wants us to live well in this land, even though He has intended for us eternity. He wants us also to live well here. So how do we break this commandment? Proverbs 23 and Proverbs 15. I did that kind of backwards, didn't I?
Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old.
Which one was that? The 23? No, you read the right one. Was that the 23 or the 15? That was the 20. Okay. Yeah. Anybody got the 15 one?
My
son makes a glad father, but a foolish man despises his mother.
Yeah. All right. See, don't despise and don't look down on them. Right. Right. How's that? I like how on both of them it talked about the mother, right? Hell hath no fury, they say. But it goes back to that, that it is your, and the other part of that is it's your source of life too. We don't think about that. This is where not only did you come from, originate, but it's also where all good comes to you. I mean, obviously until you're able to do it on your own a little bit, but we should always honor that. And by the way, when are you done being a parent? Never. There's this whole, and I hear this all the time, and we got to get this out of our heads, people. Well, they're grown now, and so I don't want to ruffle anything, so I'm not going to say anything. Who's felt that way before? Fess up. Right? I'm not going to say anything. Okay. That would be like God saying, well, I got them to their confirmation. When does God the Father, stop counseling us? Never. We should never get rid of that, that's always a role that we have. I mean, even when you are a grandparent or a great-grandparent, you're always to be there for counsel, advice, wisdom, encouragement, these type of things. That doesn't ever stop. And we got to get rid of that mentality. And we need to shake it amongst the youth as well. Now, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that mom and dad, get to come in and say, all right, kids, whip out the payroll ledger. I want to see how things are going in this household, all right? But they can encourage them. Are you being wise? Are these things happening? How are things going? How are you doing? And, and this is the thing, too. We need to go back to kind of living the way that, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, the way that the Amish live, where, as you have, how the Amish do this, right? You got your house, okay? And then, here's your two people, okay? But this is as good as it gets, by the way, okay? But when they have kids, guess what they do? Right? I don't know who gets a smaller room. Now, the neat thing about this and the problem that we have today is that if you live this close, are you ever done parenting? No. And they do things normally too. So, here's grandma, grandpa, and mom and dad, and now the kids are in this one. And then one night, these two are up at night fighting and yelling at each other. Who hears it? Everybody hears it, So the next day, when grandpa, dad, and son go out to the field to work, then that conversation comes up. Hey, we heard you guys last night, right? And we're wondering how things are going, and then the ladies are all standing around the kitchen as they do. Hey, we heard you last night. What's going on? In other words, there was always counsel. Now what we do, right, is we move away to our own house, right? And we fight and we quarrel and we do all this kind of stuff, and nobody knows. Nobody knows. And there's nobody there to counsel. There's nobody there to guide. There's nobody to be there to help out, right? And I've often asked people to come to me for, marital things. And I'll say, well, let me ask you this. How do you guys talk to each other? And then I say, would you talk the same way if I was sitting at the table with you? Or let's go up several bazillion steps. If Jesus was sitting at the table with you, would you say those same words? And that's the problem we have with living in such a separated society. Is we don't guard. If you're going to do that, right? We all should. This would be us Lutherans will make this. Let's make this a societal change. We're going to do this from now on, right? We're going to be so bold about how we live. All of us are going to build glass houses, except for the closet in the bathroom.
And then have an all-stone yard. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. But you say, should your life be an open book? Keep it private and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, that's not a good thing to do. Because what happens is they keep it private until they show up in pastor's office one day, and by the time they get there, guess what? One person's already divorced. No, I mean that's the whole point. Have you gotten counsel and aid? Have you been there? Have your friends been there? I always tell wedding parties that. Let's have these wedding parties. It's always so funny too, because everything's just picture perfect, right? You know, I mean, he's got his crew of ruffians that wouldn't dress like this on a normal day to save their lives, right? You know, and of course, then they're just made up to the hilt, and they all look exactly the same. But I tell them, I say, you know why you're up here, right? You're up here to be this counsel for these people, to make them sure, see every day, so they know you're their witnesses. You made a vow. Now, don't get me wrong, it's good for one of the, to be there when they come, and he comes and he hangs out with the guys, they're sitting at the bar, and he starts gritching, that woman, and he starts going, and they all listen. Oh, there you go, yeah, all right. Now, go home and take care of her as the Lord said to. Same thing with her, they're at the, coffee shop, sipping coffee with their fingers in the air, and she sits there and she's talking about how he just did da-da-da-da-da-da, and they all listen. And then when they get done, they say, hey, now go home and respect your husband, right? That's what that's for. But now what do? You're right. You don't deserve that. You should have something better than that. And then they're like, yeah. No. Sir, you're a scumbag, and be happy you got a wife at all. All right, I have no idea how I went down that path. Let's come back. Should a rebellious child be tolerated? Deuteronomy 21. Anybody there? Or out loud.
A rebellious son. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of the city shall stone him to death. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Wow. I should have read that before I...
Next time I'm going to peruse it.
That's why I had daughters.
Go on and say, stone them with stones.
With stones, yeah.
With stones to stone him.
Right, yeah, right, exactly.
Stone him with something else.
Don't stone him, don't get him stoned. Yeah. But is a rebellious son tolerated? No. And what is the reason? What's that?
He's rebelling against God.
Against God. What does it say? Because he's also going to create rebellion. It's going to create rebellion. And so you got to get this evil from your midst. You've got to get it out of there. And we're in a society today that is literally saying, no, you be who you want to be. You be the way you are. There's rebellion going on. And we say, hey, you know what? It's just a thing. It's just what it is. There's actually a type of parenting out there called helicopter parenting. Have you heard this before? Right? Where you just sit there and you watch them and you don't intervene at all until they do something that might harm their body. Well, what about morals? What about righteousness? What about, them, being there? You're training their body to be there for their neighbor. All they're learning is their body is for themselves.
And we want them to choose for themselves.
Right.
What they're going to believe and how they're going to live. You've heard that?
So I'm not taking to church because then I'm...
Imposing my religion.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, and that's the funny part about it is that we're actually imposing something very great upon them, even when we do something like that.
You're always teaching your kids no matter what.
And what they're learning is how, and this is false, but this is what they're learning. Is they're learning is how perfect I am. I can do no wrong.
Right.
I can do no wrong.
And I'm the only authority over you.
Right, and nobody else can tell me what...
You're not possible.
Right, and it subverts authority and it generates chaos because you get a group of these.
You've seen it so much in schools today, the lack of trust in teachers, and my parents never knew what the heck was going on in school. They just trusted it.
Right.
And now they're not meeting and everything, and just causing all kinds of chaos about things they have no idea about.
Yeah.
What's the danger?
And you get an award for doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
We had a friend in her
Detention?
Yes, but he had to have an award, because everybody got an award. So his award was, he was the best one in detention.
I got a wall of them. Yeah. But this is what it is. I mean, you know, and while we want to encourage proper behavior, you know, what we don't want to do is we don't just want to encourage the natural nature of man in its every move, you know. And so I'm not saying there shouldn't be rewards as you're raised. Hey, this is a good job. But really, our greatest reward to our children should actually be that we acknowledge them. You know, that's the greatest reward that our children should receive, which, by the way, takes presence, parents' presence and that kind of stuff, you know, that we acknowledge them. Here's your reward. I have stood here and witnessed this, and you have done a good thing. Okay. Next one, how do we keep this commandment? And we're just going to go through these quickly. We're going to read all 3 or 4 of these. Mark 7, John 19, Hebrews 13, Luke 2. Just yell at the one you got and start reading it.
Mark 7, verse 10. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever devours father or mother must surely die. But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from me is children,
Yep.
that is given to God.
Okay, and that was when Jesus confronts them because they were saying that, listen, if you honor God, give all your possessions to the Lord, and it would leave their parents who depended on them for the livelihood without, you know, that was the rule that came in the temple. And he says, you've done wrong here. Anybody else? Another one.
I got John 19, 25 to 27. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, excuse me, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home.
Okay, so even in the hour of his death, he demonstrates thinking on his earthly mother, you know, which most of us would be thinking about dying at that point in time. Right? Anybody else?
Luke 2:51, and he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart.
Okay.
Jesus in the temple.
Yep, Jesus in the temple at 12 years old, right? Anybody do Hebrews 1 by chance?
I got it.
Okay.
Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls, as those will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you.
Okay, so that one says clearly obey. So, I mean, here's where, again, Martin Luther didn't just scrounge up these definitions out of the sky. He went to scriptures, you know, so we honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. You know, we take care of them, we honor them, these authorities that God has kept and put over us. So when do we disobey authorities? It becomes the next question.
Acts 5:29. But Peter and the apostles answered, We must obey God rather than man.
Okay, so when is it? Only when?
God is different.
Yeah, when God has something else to say, you know, when, you know, which is why we as a believing people can rebel against laws. I'll pick on an easy one, abortion, all right? God has clearly said, you shall not murder. We can rebel against such a law, all right? Because God has a thing that he has spoken in this case, okay? So we can do that, all right? We're not going to read the other one. It just talks about us being in the Lord more than, in other words, that we are in man. Now, the last question there, what if you're compelled to do something?
Compelled by who?
Let's talk about maybe soldiers,
Told to kill.
right? By the way, there have been soldiers who have been struggling with this before. You know, they've gone into situations and they've been told, here's what you're going to do, and they found out that maybe they've created a massacre or something like that. Or, here's a big one. You know, we know this happened. They launched a drone attack over in Afghanistan somewhere, and they kind of find out it attacked civilians in this town, there was nobody there. Imagine if you were that drone operator. And a massive disconnect. I saw a movie about that not too long ago. By the way, it's not a sanctified movie. No, I will not recommend it to you. But it was interesting because it did have that struggle of fighting a war where you never see your enemy. And there's a mental thing that happens to those soldiers when they know that they've dropped a bomb on somebody and you don't ever get to see who it was. There's a mental thing that happens there. But what about that person? That person pulled the trigger. That wasn't the president who ordered it. He didn't pull the trigger. He just ordered it. This guy plopped that sucker down right on somebody's living room. Is he, well, we're going to know the answer to this, but is he okay? Did he still fulfill God's will?
I think about Civil War where you might have killed your brother,
Right? Yeah.
Hitler's soldiers.
Right. There's a lot of things that people, were to do. I saw this even in Iraq where, we were liberating them over there and they were wanting help and they were wanting out all this kind of stuff. But as soon as they walked back towards, their enemy lines, they would yell back hate phrases to us. Hate Americans, get out, and all that kind of stuff, because they knew that if their government saw them colluding with us, they'd get killed. And we could do all kinds of philosophical things on how far do we go or whatever it is. But ultimately, if you are following the authorities, and especially if it is unbeknownst to you, you have no other recollection, then you should have no qualms. Now, let's say you did know. Guess what? The forgiveness of Christ Jesus is there for you as well. And that's when we repent of those sins and we receive the forgiveness of Christ. But, we see this happen in some places. And Martin Luther wrote a whole treatise on can soldiers be saved? All right? Who in here has read it?
I've come across it.
Yeah. Can soldiers be, and he writes a whole thing on that. Can soldiers be saved? Because that was what soldiers were dealing with. Oh my gosh, we went into this and we were told to kill all these people, and so we did. We killed them all. Of course, you look at the way we used to fight wars. Think of Hiroshima and stuff like that. That's like when we drop one bomb on somebody in Afghanistan, their neighborhood, and they're complaining about us. People, you don't understand. If we thought there was a terrorist in that city in Afghanistan years ago, we'd have carpet bombed the whole town. What we're doing is more than, right when it comes to these things.
The technology has changed so much that we can target specific, small area, localized area.
Yeah.
That was impossible.
Yeah, it's a very, very different thing. But going back to the point, when you're compelled to do something, you go back to you were following the authorities over, especially if you did not know. But even if you do find out later that you have sinned, then there is repentance. We go back to repentance. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the fourth commandment, authority? All right. Below the line then is fifth commandment. All right, so fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What's the blessing of this commandment?
If everybody followed it, you wouldn't get murdered.
Yeah, right. I'm alive. I don't know how many of you do that every morning. I'm alive. It's still it's. You did. Yeah. I don't know how you know Martin Luther's morning and evening prayer. If you don't, I encourage you that you have safely kept this night from all harm and danger. We don't usually think of that, right? We usually think of going to bed in peace, but it's not always the case. So Genesis 2:7 and John 13. Let's look at those.
I got John 13 here.
Okay.
A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I loved you, and also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.
Okay. And then the Genesis one. Anybody got that one?
Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into the nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature.
Right. So the blessing of the fifth commandment is that we have life. But those two passages were chosen because it's not just life. That's not what, this plant has life. You're not a fern, people. I don't know if that's a fern, by the way. I have no idea what a fern is. Yeah.
You're not a fern.
Yeah. You're not a fern either. That's right. But you are God breathed. What other creatures God breathed? Not the livestock, even though they have breath, and it says they have breath in their, they breathe and have life. It says that, but you're the only part of creation that is God breathed. God breathed. Nothing else is God breathed. And what's really interesting too is when it says that He breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. That word in there in the Hebrew is also the word that is used for spirit or wind. You've been given that spirit. The door must be locked back there, right? And so this is significant. And then I love the John passage too, because we're part of a heavenly kingdom. We're part of God's discipleship, part of His family, and that sets us apart as living creatures. That's different than just being alive. That sets us apart as special. In other words, in all the life that is there. So our life means so much to us. So much to us. Okay, who's our neighbor?
Yes.
Yes, right. And we're not going to read it, by the way, but what is Luke 10? Good Samaritan, right. Luke 10 is the Good Samaritan. So you guys all know the story of the Good Samaritan, okay? And so we look at that story of the Good Samaritan. And then, by the way, it's a parable, so Jesus makes up a story, which is why He puts the characters in there like He does, because He uses the priest and the what's the other one? The priest and the Levite. So both of them are churchy people, right? And they pass around, and He says, "Who's your neighbor?" And they're like, "Well, the one that probably took care of you." Well, all of them were this guy's neighbor, but only two of them were actually acted as neighbor, or only one of them acted as neighbor to him, namely the Samaritan, which again, Jesus used that Samaritan on purpose because they wouldn't have liked Samaritans. They would have seen Samaritan as dirty, and no Samaritan would do any good deed to anybody from Judah. So He uses that very, very clearly when he does this. But this also creates a problem for us people, because if you have knowledge, then you have responsibility. If you have knowledge, you have responsibility. We love to erect privacy fences, don't we? Right? Not just a fence. Put a fence up so your chickens stay in, okay? All right? But we love privacy fences so that nobody can see, or you hear something or whatever it is. No, if somebody next door is being abused or hurt or is hungry or starving and you know it, right, then you have the responsibility. Because and the parable emphasizes this as well. Everybody that you come in contact with, you are a neighbor to, but especially those in need. Especially those in need. You're supposed to reach out and help, right? And be a neighbor to those people. And so and that's, like I said, that brings us trouble today, because now all you gotta do is flip on the TV, and I know people all over the world. I don't know if you guys get this. I've been in the LCMS long enough now. I get requests from every single RSO in the synod.
I notice in the parable that Jesus tells, there's only one guy in the ditch.
Right.
In our lives.
It's a lot, right? Well, you think about that too. I had this, actually it was in a stewardship conference that I went to, where the guy says, the Old Testament covenant said you got to give 10%. He said, listen, you usually give 10% in the Old Testament. He says, we're in the New Testament. He says, it should be way greater than that. He says, 10% was a law. We're in the gospel. We should be giving way greater than that. He says, besides, he also says this. He says, besides, they gave 10% to take care of the nation. God wants us to reach out to the world. 10% was just to take care of the nation. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Right? But we're supposed to take care of the world. We should be thinking of that. That's what God has given us for, is to take care the people that are around us. And again, we have a greater responsibility now because we know. And then people have asked me that before, like, I went to Desert Storm, like I said before, do you think it was right to be there? And I said, well, yeah, I've always thought it was right to be there. Number one, because the authorities over me said, yes, so, and so I said, yes, sir, and went on my way. And if I don't do that, by the way, that ensues in chaos, all right, which is why it's never allowed in the military. And they said, but then when I got there, I saw those people and saw what they were living in, and then I knew I was in the right place, right? Now, I wasn't naive to think I could save them all, but, what can we do to help? What can we do while we're here to help? Where are we at?
How do we break this commandment?
Oh, yeah. This one's easy. Let's read a couple of these. Anybody got any of those looked up yet?
Proverbs, be not envious of evil men nor desire to be with them, for their hearts devise violence and their lips talk of trouble.
Okay. So don't be talking about violence and trouble, and don't be involved with those people either. You know who they are. Anybody else got another one?
Matthew, for I was hungry and you gave me no food, I was thirsty and you gave me no drink, I was a stranger and you did not welcome me in, naked and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison and you did not visit me.
I love when Jesus says that, because he starts actually off with a positive in that passage. He says, hey, thanks, guys, because you gave me a coat when I was cold, you gave me some food when I was hungry, and they're all sitting there going, this is a guy who fed 5,000. Do you guys remember giving him something? I don't remember. And they're like, when did we do it? And then Jesus clearly says it. When you did it to these, and then it comes back to the negative, Well, guess what? Those of you are the opposite if you didn't do it, And sometimes it's hard in the world in which we live. I got a funny story. This happened to my sister. It's so great. Oh, my gosh. This is why you don't have to make up stories in this world. The real ones are too much fun. But she's going down the street, she comes to the corner and here's this guy sitting there saying, he needs money for food or whatever it is. And so he comes up there, and he's obviously had a rough time in his life, and he's only got like a couple teeth or whatever it is, right? And so she sticks this apple out the door. and he yells at her, how am I supposed to eat that?
That's why I get up.
She tells that story, and I just laugh. Oh my gosh, she should have took it and smashed it or something. Now, now, the problem with those situations too, and I always tell people this, and I don't care if you hand somebody some money on the street corner, that's not the big, but a lot of times those people, that's not what they need, they need other helps. Plus, we've set up social things to help them get food and stuff like that.
Too much time to find out.
Yeah, point them in the right direction, that's the responsibility of others to kind of weed through the thing. Plus, you got to be careful too, scared the crap out of my sister after that, I know. It's like, green light, green light, green light, green light. Oh, too funny. All right, enough of that. How do we keep this commandment? Anybody look up Romans or Proverbs or Ephesians?
I got Ephesians.
Yep.
Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you.
Okay, so still have compassionate hearts in the midst of all these things. Look at those who are around you. Any others? Romans or Proverbs? Anybody look those up?
Proverbs is, be not envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their hearts devise violence, and their lips talk of trouble.
That was 24.
Oh yeah, sorry. We're on.
Get the wrong one?
Yeah, we're on 31. 30.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. I was gonna say, I chose a really bad passage for that one. I thought.
I was really hard at that.
I know. Me too. Which?
Romans 1 says, to the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him.
Yeah.
If he is thirsty, give him something to drink, for by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. Go back to like the people that are wandering about looking for handouts or whatever it is. you really need to research what do they need. It's like when somebody needs money, I'm like, hey, you know what? Great. We'll get you some clothing, we'll get you some food or whatever it is. But what I really want to get you is through whatever got you here. That's what I want to get you. I want to actually be an aid to you, not just, one I mean, what good's one meal? Because tomorrow you're going to be hungry again. Let me be an aid to you, which sometimes you can. That's how I weed through them, by the way, start asking these questions, It was really fun where I lived in Imperial because I'd start asking, where are you from? Oh, I come from Iowa or something like that. Yeah. Okay, then I start talking to them. Well, what's going on? How'd you get this way? Okay, all right. Where are you going? Well, I'm trying to head down to Texas. Now, I'll say to them, listen, I don't know my geometry very well, but something doesn't add up with this story here, Well, and that's how you find out they're just drifting, going from town to town, and and kind of freeloading off of people, And you get down to the root of the problem. What do you need? What's going on, right?
There was a time a few years ago that some of you might remember if you were at the later service. There was an African American woman that came into our church one time, and right during service, she had kind of walked her way along the side and reached the pastor at the front. I think it was Pastor Postle.
Yeah.
And he let her kind of, he thought she was making an announcement or something, even though nobody knew who she was. And she went up to the podium and shared that she was going through a hard time and that she needed some help and stuff. And I think very many people in this church, there was an outpouring of help for this lady. And some of it's financial, and there's always people who are skeptical and stuff like that. But in those kinds of situations, especially if it's a woman, I'm like, no one would have the guts to just go out there if it was like fraud. In my
Right.
opinion. And I would rather err on the side of compassion and generosity than not just go ahead and give some cash that's right in their wallet.
Right, and I think that's the thing too. We've talked about those situations now, especially with this church security. What do you do if somebody walks up front? And you try to redirect them, because obviously this person that came in was in some sort of emotional crossroads in their life. And so how do we get it so that they're out of that emotional crossroads? That's the thing you've got to look at. Which, by the way, I've dealt with a lot of homeless and drifters. Our church was right on the main highway, and on the main highway, because it was a highway, not an interstate, so hitchhikers could go up and down that thing all the time. Dealt with a lot of them. And there are a lot of them that either have or certifiable emotional psychological issues, certifiable, or their situation has created emotional situations that they need assistance with. Because you can be psychologically, we don't believe in psychological illness the way we do physical illness. That's a bad thing about our culture. But you can have psychological illnesses, but you can also have emotional trauma just from going through things too, which don't necessarily lead to psychosis, but can give the appearance of psychosis in situations as well. Yeah, it's always and that's why we joke about these things. But you always have to have that compassionate heart, as you're doing things. And I do joke, by the way, people. I don't harass people when they come to my door, so I think it's all good. All right, don't think I shun everybody that comes walking in, but I do investigate to find out who's going. Well, and that's the other thing too, though, when it comes to this, because we're going to be covering the 7th commandment. If we just hand out to every person that walks up to the door, $100 Walmart card, what's the fault with that? I am not saying that over. That was not me. NSA's coming in on our thing there, yeah. You haven't. You've also you haven't really justified what you're taking care of them, but you also have mismanaged what was trusted to you. And I've said this before. We had a situation in Lincoln where the ladies went in with their children to the women's bathroom in this park. We were there at the park, and they went in there, and there was a homeless person, and not a female, by the way, on the floor asleep in the bathroom, and everybody was aroused, and they woke up when they come in there and all this kind of stuff, and they kind of ran the kids off and all that kind of stuff. And later on, they were like, oh, they felt bad. They should have tried to help the person, because my brother-in-law then went over there and ran them off, And I said, no. You are violating a primary vocation if you would have done that, because one vocation that God gave you above helping that person was being a mother. You don't put that at risk. I've said this before. God does not put things He gave you in conflict with one another. And so their first responsibility was to those children to protect them. Now their second, you have things that go down on that line as you go through those things. That was way down there at that point in time. And so they needed to get out there and take care of what first things are there first. There'll always be a chance to help somebody later on. Does that make sense? So you got to watch how you do things. We don't just throw. And again, you're not helping people if you just throw stuff at them. It doesn't help. How do we even get there? This is on murder. All right, we're going to go through this real quick. I'm going to wrap this up here. Again, whatever we didn't get through, go through at home. Take a look at it. God talks about life. All right, He creates and gives its worth. It's what's in Genesis chapter 9. He is the one who decides what worth is to life. All right, and this is a huge thing that we struggle with when it comes to things like depression and suicide and stuff like this, because we have our worth determined by other influences that are not from God, whether it's the world or our own self-image. All right, and we don't want to do that. We want to go back to who is the author of life. Okay, and then Matthew 22 talks about considering others as yours. This is mine. God gave me this neighbor. I need to watch out for it. That's what I'm supposed to do. So when you see somebody doing something harmful to their body and you tell them to knock it off, they say, none of your business. Wrong. My business, thus saith the Lord. It is my business to watch after you. That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay? You can go through and look at these things. Obviously, abortion is wrong. The one text in it's really great. Jeremiah God talks about how before you were formed, I knew you. Psalm 139 it's where it says God knit you together. I was thinking Grandma. Oh, look, I made a David, Suicide, assisted suicide, they call it nowadays. It's still murder. Euthanasia is another obvious one. Europe is getting really bad about this, people. Once Grandma or Grandpa can't remember their loved ones anymore, you take them down to the clinic and the doctor puts them to death. Wretched stuff. Just absolutely a culture of death type stuff. We're talking culture of death. Horrible, right? In Europe.
Kind of widespread or just certain countries?
Yeah, like Sweden's a big one. Sweden is a very big one. They got these clinics. There's a movie made out. I don't want to tell you the name of the movie because it's horrible. Such a horrible. And the movie, by the way, was great. And you thought it was going to have a happy ending. And it didn't, and it was like, oh my gosh. I just was like wanted to die when the ending still ended the way it did, because there was love, there was care, there was compassion. Some we don't think about too much. Abuse is another one. Some stuff there from Colossians on that. Recklessness. Oh, you downhill skiers. Okay. Hate, prejudice, racism, these are all forms of hate and breaking the fifth commandment, all right? What can we do when someone is considering these things, right? Or if we're considering them ourselves, by the way, I should have put that on there, I didn't. We talk to God, we talk to them. We don't ever be alone, okay? Loneliness is bad, people. Loneliness is bad, okay? There are people, by the way, that are surrounded by people in our culture today, and they're still reporting that they're lonely, because we're such an introverted society. Loneliness is bad. Look to Christ. Be forgiven. Okay, those are things we need to remember there. Finally, the last question on there. Who does have the authority to take a life? All right, God and those that He's placed in authority. Right? St. Paul talks about this. Listen to those that God has placed over you, for He did not give them the sword for no reason at all. If you are a rule breaker, then God has put them there to take care of those who break rules. Okay? The other thing you could go to, which I wrote down there, was even, the 2 or 3 witnesses, which is why it's actually a good thing that we do juries. Okay? 2 or 3 witnesses come in, and that's the thing that can then allow us to do capital punishment. In other words, this is what it is. Now, do we have to do capital punishment? No, we don't have to. Okay? All right, we don't have to. But the law of the God's Word does allow it if we have those 2 or 3 witnesses to that type of thing. Policemen, soldiers, they have authority in those types of situations. They can do it because they've been given authority and been given those things to take care of. So there are places where we do that. Okay? Sorry we had to rush through the end there. Had a great time telling stories, though. That was awesome. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you very much.